One day, all the applause stops. The lights go out, and what was once noise turns into silence. Marcus Reid was a god on the courts, until an injury ripped him from the top and left him face to face with the void. It was in that silence, painful and real, that he discovered something fame never showed him. That true success isn't being applauded, it's being able to get back up when no one else is watching. This is a story about falling, new beginnings, and purpose. The silence after the spotlight. The autumn rain hammered against the windows of an imposing mansion on the outskirts of Nashville in October 2024. The drops sliding down the glass like tears the house itself was weeping. Inside, Marcus Reid sat motionless in a leather armchair, his 34-year-old body still commanding at 6'4". But his eyes were empty, fixed on a championship ring on his finger that caught the dim light of the lampshade. The silence was suffocating. No crowd screaming his name. No squeak of sneakers on polished hardwood. No adrenaline coursing through his veins as he nailed a three-pointer at the buzzer. Just rain and emptiness, and the ghost of who he used to be. 12 years. That's how long Marcus Reid had been a god. From the streets of Detroit to the bright lights of the United Center in Chicago, he had lived a dream millions could only imagine. 5 All-Star appearances, 2 NBA championships, endorsement deals that made him a household name. His dribble was poetry. His ability to close out games was legendary. But 13 months ago, his right knee had exploded during a playoff game, the sound of ligaments tearing echoing louder than the gasps of 20,000 fans. Surgery after surgery failed. The doctor's words were a death sentence. Your career is over. At 33, Marcus Reid died on that operating table, even if his heart kept beating. Nashville felt like an escape. Away from the expectations of Chicago, away from the media circus, away from the fans who looked at him with pity instead of reverence. He had bought this mansion, 5 bedrooms, a home theater, an indoor basketball court he couldn't bring himself to step onto, thinking the solitude would heal him. But the solitude had become a prison. His phone rarely rang. His agent stopped calling after the retirement press conference. Teammates moved on, the group chats going silent. Even his father, a factory worker who pushed him since childhood, barely checked in, disappointed Marcus hadn't figured out what comes next. The trophies lined up in the hallway mocked him, relics of a man who no longer existed. That night, something shifted. Marcus found himself scrolling through old game videos on his laptop, watching himself blow past defenders, the crowd roaring, his teammates celebrating. He paused on one clip, a kid in the front row, no older than 10, screaming his name with pure joy. Marcus's chest tightened. When was the last time he felt that alive? That purposeful? He slammed the laptop shut, the screen going black, and stared at his reflection in the dark glass. A stranger looked back. The rain intensified, and somewhere in the storm, a question formed. Who am I without basketball? The silence offered no answer, but for the first time in months, Marcus wondered if he had the courage to find out. The morning in Nashville broke gray in October 2024, fog hovering over the Cumberland River like a veil hiding the city from itself. Marcus Reid woke up at 11 in the morning, the digital clock on the bedside table blinking red. Another purposeless day, another day with no reason to get out of bed. At 34, he dragged his body to the bathroom, avoiding the mirror, the routine of a man who had given up on recognizing himself. The mansion, with its empty corridors and echo of lonely footsteps, seemed larger every day, a labyrinth of memories that suffocated him. Nashville, known as Music City, pulsed with life on the streets. Broadway bars packed with tourists, musicians playing on every corner, the smell of smoked barbecue drifting in the air. But Marcus walked through the city like a ghost. He tried to go out, force himself to feel something, but everything seemed filtered, distant. In Centennial Park, he watched families laughing, children running, and felt a lump in his throat. Before, he was stopped for autographs. Now, no one recognized him. Or worse, they pretended not to, the awkwardness evident in averted gazes. Fame had evaporated like smoke, and with it, his identity. The first signs of depression had arrived silently. During the months after the injury, Marcus tried to maintain a routine: gym, physical therapy, meetings with his agent. But each session was a reminder of what he had lost. The pain in his knee was constant, a sharp pang that shot up when climbing stairs, but the emotional pain was worse. He started missing appointments, ignoring calls, spending entire days in the armchair watching reruns of old games. Food lost its taste. Sleep came in irregular bursts. nightmares waking him up at 3 in the morning with the imaginary sound of his knee popping. He tried therapy but quit after 2 sessions. "How could you possibly understand?" he snarled at the therapist, leaving before she could answer. Real connections crumbled. His agent, Derek, called at first, enthusiastic about post-career opportunities. Sports commentator, assistant coach, even reality TV. Marcus refused everything, the idea of being reduced to a caricature of himself unbearable. Derek stopped insisting. Teammates, formerly brothers, were now strangers busy with their own lives. He scrolled through Instagram, seeing photos of them at parties, practices, with their families, lives that went on without him. His ex-girlfriend, Simone, a model who left him 6 months after the injury, posted photos with a new boyfriend, an active player. Marcus blocked the account, but the wound remained open. The solitude deepened. On a cold night, Marcus went to the Bluebird Cafe, a small, famous live music bar in Nashville. He sat in the back, ordering whiskey after whiskey, while a red-haired singer belted out a melancholy ballad about losing and finding oneself. The lyrics hit him like a punch. "When the lights go out, who do you become?" He left before the song finished, stumbling to the parking lot, and vomited behind his car. Sitting on the cold ground, he cried for the first time since the injury, sobs tearing through his chest. No one saw. No one cared. He was invisible. Back at the mansion, Marcus wandered to the indoor court. The fluorescent lights hummed as they came on, illuminating the gleaming floor he hadn't stepped on in months. An orange basketball rested in the corner, covered in dust. He approached slowly, picking it up with trembling hands, the leather familiar yet strange. He tried to dribble, but his knee screamed, and he fell to his knees, the ball rolling away. Lying on the cold floor, he stared at the ceiling, the question echoing. Who am I now? The court, once his temple, was now a tomb. In the following days, the depression intensified. Marcus stopped answering the phone completely. His father, Michael, left a sharp message. "You need to get up, boy. I didn't raise you to be weak." The words hurt more than they helped, and Marcus deleted the message, the distance between them growing. He ordered food delivery, avoiding human interaction, the empty boxes piling up in the kitchen. Alcohol became a constant companion, bourbon bottles lined up on the counter. One night, drunk, he called Simone but hung up before she answered, the shame consuming him. The lowest point came during an unannounced visit. Derek showed up at the door, worried after weeks of silence. Marcus reluctantly opened it, his unshaven beard and swollen eyes betraying his state. "Man, are you okay?" Derek asked, stepping inside. The mansion smelled of mold and neglect. Marcus mumbled something about processing, but Derek pressed. "You can't live like this. You need help." The phrase triggered rage, and Marcus exploded. "Help? You don't get it. I was somebody. Now I'm nothing." Derek tried to calm him, but Marcus shoved him out, slamming the door. Alone again, he collapsed on the floor, the anger giving way to despair. But something unexpected happened that night. Marcus, unable to sleep, went for a walk at 2 in the morning. Nashville, silent under the streetlights, looked different. Less touristy, more real. He passed a park where a homeless man slept on a bench, covered by a torn blanket. Marcus stopped, watching, and for a moment felt a strange connection, both invisible, both lost. He left a $20 bill on the bench, the gesture small but significant. Walking back, he noticed a lit public court, where a teenager was practicing alone, shooting baskets relentlessly. Marcus watched from the fence, the boy's dedication reminding him of himself at 15 in Detroit. Something inside him flickered, a distant echo of purpose. Back at the mansion, Marcus opened a dusty notebook, a gift from Simone he had never used. He wrote, his pen hesitant. What if I could be someone again, but different? The question scared him, but it also lit a spark. Nashville, with its quiet streets and invisible people, began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, there was a path beyond basketball. Marcus closed the notebook, exhausted but restless, and for the first time in months, he slept without nightmares. The morning light entered timidly through the curtains of Marcus Reid's mansion in Nashville, October 2024 pressing on with colder days and heavier skies. At 34, he woke up with a strange feeling. Not exactly hope, but a restlessness that kept him from falling back asleep. The notebook next to his bed, with the question scrawled the night before, stared at him. What if I could be someone again, but different? The words seemed ridiculous in the daylight, but something about them persisted, a mental itch he couldn't ignore. He got up, his knee cracking in protest, and decided to go out, not to run away, but to search. Nashville, with its streets beginning to pulse with morning life, offered a different scene. Marcus drove aimlessly, passing coffee shops where baristas served lattes with foam art, vintage record stores with vinyl stacked in the windows, and the farmers' market crowded with locals buying fresh produce. He stopped at a cafe called the Frothy Monkey, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. He watched the people. A mother with 2 children, a man in a suit reading the newspaper, a young woman with a guitar case on her back. No one recognized him, and for the first time, it didn't hurt so much. It was liberating, in a way, to be just another face in the crowd. The depression, however, had not vanished. It manifested in waves, moments of clarity followed by abysses of despair. In the cafe, Marcus felt his chest tighten when he saw a group of teenagers watching NBA highlights on a cell phone, laughing and commenting on current players. He was not among them. His era had passed. The coffee grew cold in his hands as he fought the urge to bolt. But he took a deep breath, clutching the table, and forced himself to stay. "One step at a time," he muttered to himself, a phrase his mother used to say before she died when he was 17. The memory brought tears, but also strength. Leaving the cafe, Marcus walked to the Shelby Bottoms Greenway, a trail along the Cumberland River. The cold October air cut at his skin, but he welcomed the sensation. He was alive, at least physically. On the trail, he passed runners, cyclists, and an elderly man walking a dog. The man waved, a simple but warm gesture, and Marcus waved back, surprised by how isolated he had been. The walk calmed his mind, the sound of the river and the rustling leaves creating a meditative soundtrack. He stopped at a bench, watching the water flow, and thought about Detroit, the streets where he grew up, the cracked courts where he learned to play, the father who pushed him to the limit. The relationship with Michael Reid had always been complicated. His father, a tough man forged by the Detroit auto factories, saw basketball as the only way out of poverty. He trained Marcus with military rigor, waking him up at 5 in the morning for runs, criticizing every mistake, celebrating victories with grunts of approval. Marcus loved him, but also feared him. When the injury happened, Michael's disappointment was palpable. "You had everything," he had said in their last call months ago. "And you threw it away." Marcus didn't reply, guilt and anger entwining. Sitting on the bench, he picked up the phone, his fingers hovering over his father's name, but he couldn't call. Not yet. Back at the mansion, Marcus found a letter in the mailbox. It was from a former teammate, Jamal, who now coached youth at a community center in Chicago. The handwritten letter said, "Man, I heard you're in Nashville. I know it's hard. I went through it when I retired. But I found purpose coaching kids who have nothing. Maybe you should try. You were always good at lifting others up." Marcus read and reread it, the words resonating. Coaching? He had never considered it. The idea scared him. How could he teach when he felt so lost? But it planted a seed. That night, Marcus returned to the public court where he had seen the teenager practicing. The kid was there again, sweating under the lights, dribbling around makeshift cones. Marcus watched from the fence, fascinated by the dedication. When the boy missed a layup, he cursed in frustration, and Marcus, without thinking, yelled, "Your elbow is too wide. Adjust the angle." The teenager stopped, looking at him. "Do you play?" he asked. Marcus hesitated. "I used to." The kid, named Elijah, 16 years old, invited him inside. Marcus refused, his knee throbbing, but promised to come back. "Tomorrow?" Elijah asked, hopeful. Marcus nodded, something in the boy's look reminding him of himself. The interaction left Marcus restless but energized. Back at the mansion, he called Derek, his agent, for the first time in weeks. "I need a favor," he said, his voice still hesitant but firmer. "Do you know of any community center here in Nashville?" Derek, surprised but relieved, promised to research. Marcus also tried to call his father, but hung up before connecting. He wasn't ready yet. Instead, he wrote in the notebook, "Maybe I can be useful again." The phrase was fragile, but it was a start. The following days brought small changes. Marcus started frequenting the public court, watching Elijah practice and offering occasional tips. The boy was talented but undisciplined, and Marcus saw a project in him. They barely talked, but Marcus's presence seemed to motivate Elijah, who trained more intensely when he was there. One night after practice, Elijah asked, "Why did you stop playing?" Marcus, picking up the ball, answered simply, "My body didn't give me a choice." Elijah nodded, respectful, and didn't press. Honesty was rare, and Marcus appreciated it. The depression still visited him. There were nights when he drank too much, waking up on the sofa with the TV on random channels. But there were also mornings when he woke up earlier, walking to the Greenway before sunrise, the cold keeping him present. Nashville, with its mix of music, history, and invisible people like him, began to feel less like exile and more like a refuge. Derek called with information about the Napier Community Center, a facility on the east side of Nashville that served low-income youth. "They are looking for volunteers," Derek said. Marcus thanked him, but didn't commit. Fear still held him back. The turning point came on a rainy night. Marcus was on the mansion's indoor court, the ball in his hands, his knee hurting but he ignored it. He shot, missing, and shot again, scoring. Each shot was a battle against the body that had betrayed him, but also a reconnection with the love that had brought him here. Sweating, exhausted, he stopped, looking up at the ceiling. "I can still do something," he whispered. The affirmation was small but powerful. He picked up his phone and sent a text to Derek. "Set up a meeting at Napier. I want to check it out." Nashville, shrouded in mist that night, seemed to support Marcus as he took this step. The depression hadn't gone away, but it was being challenged. Sitting on the court floor, he wrote in the notebook, "Maybe the silence is where I find my voice again." The phrase guided him, and he knew that despite the fear, he was ready to try. The November morning arrived in Nashville with a biting chill, the gray sky heavy with clouds that threatened snow. Rare for the city, but welcomed by Marcus Reid. At 34, he drove to the Napier Community Center for the first time, his hands sweating on the steering wheel despite the low temperature. The red brick building, weathered by time, stood in a neighborhood where modest houses mixed with empty lots and colorful graffiti on the walls. Children were playing in the street, their laughter echoing, and Marcus felt a pang of nostalgia. Detroit had the same smell of struggle and hope. He parked, took a deep breath, and walked in, his knee protesting with every step. Inside, the gymnasium was humble, crooked hoops, faded court lines, and the smell of old sweat embedded in the walls. A group of teenagers, between 12 and 17, were chaotically dribbling balls with wild energy, while a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a bun, blew a whistle trying to organize the mayhem. She turned when she saw Marcus, her eyes widening. "You're Marcus Reid," she said, not as a question, but as a recognition charged with surprise. He nodded, uncomfortable. "I was." The woman, introducing herself as Coach Lorraine, shook his hand firmly. "These boys need you. Welcome." The first session was a disaster. Marcus, accustomed to NBA discipline, expected order but found chaos. The boys mocked each other, ignored instructions, and when he tried to demonstrate a simple dribble, his knee gave out, nearly sending him sprawling. Laughter erupted, and a skinny boy with a cut above his eyebrow yelled, "The old man can't hack it anymore." Marcus felt the anger rise, but Lorraine intervened, sending the boy on a lap run. After the session, she pulled him aside. "They're tough because their lives are tough. But if you stay, they'll respect you." Marcus, sweaty and humiliated, nearly quit right then. But something in her gaze, a mix of challenge and hope, made him promise to return. The turning point came in the third week. Marcus was helping Elijah, the teenager from the public court who now trained at Napier, when the boy with the cut above his eyebrow, named Darius, 15 years old, confronted him. "Why are you here?" Darius asked, crossing his arms. "You have money, Fame. We have nothing. What do you want from us?" The question hit Marcus like a shot. He stopped, the ball in his hands, and for the first time, he answered with brutal honesty. "I lost everything too. My body broke, my career ended, and I didn't know who I was. I'm here because maybe, by helping you, I'll find who I am now." Silence filled the gym. Darius studied him, then nodded slowly. "All right, but if you give up on us, don't come back." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. From there, something changed. The boys started listening, not because Marcus was famous, but because he was real. He shared stories, not of glory but of failure. He told them about the injury, the depression, the nights drinking alone. Elijah, always quiet, asked, "How did you get out of it?" Marcus hesitated. "I'm still getting out of it. One day at a time." The vulnerability built a bridge. Darius, it turned out, lived with his grandmother in a house without heating, his father in prison, his mother gone. Basketball was his only way out. Marcus saw himself in him, a kid fighting the world with only a ball and a dream. But the bigger turning point happened off the court. One evening, after practice, Marcus was invited by Lorraine to dinner at her house, a small but cozy home in the same neighborhood. There, he met her daughter, Maya, a 28-year-old Army veteran who had lost her left leg in an explosion in Afghanistan. She wore a prosthesis, moving with a grace that impressed Marcus. Over dinner, Maya spoke about her transition to civilian life, the depression, the therapy, and how finding purpose in training other veterans helped her. "You never go back to who you were," she said, looking directly at Marcus. "But you can become someone better." The words shook him, echoing the question he had written in his notebook. After dinner, Marcus and Maya talked on the porch, the November chill enveloping them. She shared her journey, the nightmares, the rage at losing a part of herself, and the decision to use her pain to help others. "You have a choice," Maya said, lighting a cigarette. "Let the past define you, or use it to build something new." Marcus, absorbing her words, felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in months: gratitude. "How did you do it?" he asked. Maya smiled, sad but strong. "By stopping comparing myself to who I was. You're not an NBA player anymore. And that's okay. Who do you want to be now?" The question haunted Marcus in the following weeks. He ramped up his work at Napier, arriving early, staying late. With Elijah, he worked on fundamentals, but also mindset, how to handle pressure, how to lose without quitting. With Darius, he was tougher, pushing him past his comfort zone, but also offering support when the boy arrived hungry, bringing snacks out of his own pocket. Lorraine noticed the change. "You're finding your rhythm," she commented, and Marcus, for the first time, believed it. But the past wouldn't let him go easily. One afternoon, a local reporter showed up at Napier, wanting to do a story about Marcus Reid's fall and resurrection. The idea disgusted him. He wasn't a redemption story for entertainment. He abruptly refused, and the reporter left frustrated. Later, Maya called, having heard about the incident. "You can't control how people see you," she said, "but you can control what you do. Focus on that." Marcus, sitting on the empty Napier court, wrote in the notebook, "I am not my past story. I am what I build now." The phrase freed him. The turning point culminated in a game. Napier hosted a friendly match against another community center, and Marcus trained the boys intensely. During the game, Darius froze in the final quarter, missing shots, the pressure crushing him. Marcus called a timeout, kneeling beside him. "I've been where you are," he said, holding Darius's shoulder. "Breathe. Trust the work. You got this." Darius went back in, hit a decisive game-winning shot, and Napier won. The celebration was loud, the boys jumping on Marcus, who laughed, a genuine, forgotten laugh. Lorraine watched him from afar, smiling, knowing something had shifted in him. That night, Marcus returned to the mansion, exhausted but alive. He picked up the phone and finally called Michael, his father. The gruff voice answered after 2 rings. "Hi, Dad," Marcus said, emotion catching in his throat. I wanted to tell you what I'm doing." Michael listened in silence as Marcus talked about Napier, the boys, the transformation. When he finished, there was a long pause. Then Michael said, his voice cracking slightly, "I'm proud of you, son." Marcus's tears fell, years of weight dissolving. "Thank you, Dad." They talked for an hour, rebuilding a bridge that seemed lost. Nashville, covered in a thin layer of snow that night, glistened under the streetlights. Marcus went out onto the porch, the cold burning his lungs, but he welcomed the sensation. He wrote in the notebook, "Maybe losing everything is how you find what matters." The phrase echoed, and Marcus knew he was finally on the right path. Winter settled over Nashville in December 2024, the city adorned with Christmas lights that glittered against the dark sky, transforming Broadway into a corridor of warm colors. Marcus Reid, at 34, drove through the streets with a strange feeling. Not exactly happiness, but something akin to contentment. The work at the Napier Community Center had become his routine, his days structured around practice sessions. And for the first time since the injury, he woke up with a purpose. The mansion, once a mausoleum of memories, now felt just like a house, too large but habitable. The reconciliation with Michael Reid brought a new dynamic. His father called weekly, the conversations still tense but less fraught with disappointment. On one call, Michael mentioned visiting Nashville for Christmas, and Marcus surprisingly accepted. "I want to show you what I'm doing," he said, and Michael responded with an approving grunt, the closest to enthusiasm he offered. Marcus prepared the guest room, clearing years of dust, and felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The visit would be a test. Could his father see value in this new life, or would he only see more failure? At Napier, Marcus delved deeper into the work. He was not just a coach, but a mentor. Elijah, the talented teenager, showed impressive progress, but also revealed insecurities. One afternoon, after a tough practice, Elijah confessed that his mother was sick, advanced breast cancer, and he was practicing to win a scholarship and pay the bills. Marcus, touched by the vulnerability, hugged the boy, promising to help him. He contacted Derek, asking for connections to scholarship programs, and started training Elijah individually, adjusting techniques for college scouts. Marcus's dedication surprised even himself. He was investing not for glory, but out of genuine care. Darius, the challenging boy, also flourished. Marcus discovered that he had a gift for leadership, despite the defensive attitude, and named him captain of the Napier team. Darius initially resisted, saying, "I'm no one's example." But Marcus insisted. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about showing that you care. Gradually, Darius took on the role, organizing extra practices and mediating conflicts among the boys. One evening, he approached Marcus. "My grandma wants to meet you," he said, nervous. Marcus visited the humble house, meeting the gray-haired woman who was raising Darius alone. She thanked him with tears in her eyes. "You brought my grandson back," she said, and Marcus, moved, promised to continue. The connection with Maya, the veteran, deepened. They started meeting for coffee, exchanging stories of loss and reconstruction. Maya had started a podcast about veterans and transitions, and invited Marcus to record an episode. He hesitated, the fear of exposure still present, but accepted. In the makeshift studio at Lorraine's house, Marcus spoke openly about the injury, the depression, and the process of finding purpose at Napier. Maya guided the conversation with empathy, and when they finished, Marcus felt light, as if he had let go of a burden. The episode was released and received hundreds of messages, former athletes, people with disabilities, all thanking him for his honesty. Marcus read every one, surprised by the impact. But the past still tested him. One afternoon, a former teammate, Travis, showed up in Nashville for a Predators game, the city's hockey team, and invited Marcus. At the Bridgestone Arena, surrounded by the roar of the crowd, Marcus felt the old adrenaline, but also a distance. Travis talked about contracts, parties, the life Marcus had left behind, and he realized he didn't feel envy. "Don't you miss it?" Travis asked, drinking beer. Marcus looked at the crowd, then at Travis. "Sometimes. But I found something that matters more." Travis laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Marcus was serious. They parted amicably, but Marcus knew that world was no longer his. The preparation for Michael's visit brought nervousness. Marcus cleaned the mansion obsessively, prepared the room, and planned to take his father to Napier. The night before the arrival, he sat with Lorraine in the empty gymnasium. "What if he doesn't approve?" Marcus confessed. Lorraine, always direct, replied, "Then that's his problem, not yours. You're doing something beautiful here. Don't let anyone take that away." The words calmed Marcus, and he wrote in the notebook, "My value doesn't depend on his approval." The affirmation strengthened him. Michael arrived on a cold December morning, driving an old Detroit truck. He got out, older and grayer than Marcus remembered, but still strong, the years of factory work etched on his calloused hands. They hugged, a brief but meaningful embrace. "Nice house," Michael commented, looking around, and Marcus nodded, guiding him inside. During lunch, the conversation was hesitant, but Michael made an effort, asking about Napier. "I'll show you tomorrow," Marcus said, and Michael nodded, curious. At Napier, Michael watched Marcus work. He saw how the boys respected him, how Darius followed his instructions, how Elijah asked for advice. During an exercise, Marcus demonstrated a move, his knee giving way slightly, but he kept going, determined. Michael, in the corner, watched in silence. After practice, the boys surrounded Marcus, thanking him, and Darius introduced Michael. "Is this your dad? He must be tough," Darius joked. Michael smiled, a rare event, and replied, "He's tougher than me." The simple exchange moved Marcus. That night, on the mansion porch, Michael finally spoke. "I was wrong," he said, his voice heavy. "I thought you gave up. But you found something better. These boys, they need you. And you need them." Marcus felt tears burn his eyes. "Thank you, Dad." Michael put his hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture that spoke louder than words. They stood there, the cold biting yet welcoming, and Marcus knew an old wound had begun to heal. The visit progressed with moments of connection. Michael helped at Napier, fixing crooked hoops and painting court lines, his practical way useful. He talked with Lorraine, who charmed him with stories, and even played a friendly game with the boys, surprising everyone with his skill for his age. The night before leaving, Michael said, "I'm proud of you, Marcus." Truly. The words, simple yet profound, sealed the reconciliation. Marcus hugged his father, holding him longer, and whispered, "I needed to hear that." After Michael left, Marcus reflected. The visit had validated his new life, but more importantly, it had healed the relationship with the man who had molded him. He wrote in the notebook, "I don't need to be who I was to have value." Nashville, with its illuminated streets and growing community, offered not just refuge, but home. Marcus felt he was finally rebuilding not just a life, but an identity, one he chose, not one that was imposed. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, it didn't scare him. The year turned to 2025 in Nashville, fireworks exploding over the Cumberland River as the city celebrated with live music and crowds on Broadway. Marcus Reid, 34, watched from his mansion's porch, a glass of orange juice in hand. He had stopped drinking months ago. The alcohol no longer needed to numb the pain. Beside him, Maya held a glass of champagne, toasting the new year. "To new beginnings," she said, and Marcus echoed, his smile genuine. The work at Napier had become his life, but 2026 would bring complications that would test his new identity in unexpected ways. January brought a proposal that shook Marcus. Derek called, excited, with an offer from ESPN, a sports analyst position, commenting on NBA games, a generous salary, national exposure. "It's perfect for you," Derek insisted. "You get back into the basketball world, but without the pressure of playing." Marcus listened in silence, his heart racing. The temptation was real, money, relevance, the chance to be seen again. But something in him resisted. "Let me think about it," he said, hanging up. That night, he wandered the mansion, the weight of the decision crushing. Would returning to fame mean abandoning Napier? The boys? The life he was building? He sought advice. Lorraine, ever pragmatic, said, "You can do both. Coach here and work there." But Marcus knew it wasn't that simple. Being an analyst required travel, commitments, a life that would pull him back into the world he had left. Maya was more direct. "What do you want?" she asked, during coffee at the Frothy Monkey. Marcus hesitated. "I don't know. Part of me wants to prove I'm still relevant." Maya nodded. "And the other part?" Marcus looked out the window, seeing children playing in the park. "The other part wants to stay here. To make a real difference." Maya smiled, sad but understanding. "Then you already know the answer." But the decision was complicated by a crisis at Napier. A real estate developer, interested in the land where the center stood, offered a considerable sum to the city to tear down the building and build luxury apartments. The news came via Lorraine, who called an emergency meeting. "We have 6 months," she said, her voice cracking. "If we don't raise the funds or find an alternative, Napier shuts down." The boys, present at the meeting, were stunned. Darius exploded. "Where are we going to go? This court is all we have." Marcus, seeing the desperation, felt the rage boil. He couldn't let this happen. The fight to save Napier began. Marcus, Lorraine, and a group of parents formed a committee, organizing fundraising events, raffles, bake sales, benefit games. Marcus used his connections, contacting former teammates, asking for donations. Jamal, his friend from Chicago, organized an exhibition game featuring ex-NBA players, with proceeds going to Napier. The community responded, but the necessary amount, $200,000, seemed unattainable. Marcus, stressed, spent sleepless nights crunching numbers, sending emails, fighting a system that valued profit over people. The ESPN offer came back to haunt him. Derek pushed. "Take the job, use the money to save Napier." The logic was sound, but Marcus feared that accepting would mean committing to a life he no longer wanted. He talked to Elijah, now 17 and on the verge of receiving college scholarship offers. "What would you do?" Marcus asked. Elijah, mature beyond his years, replied, "You always told us that success isn't about fame, but about impact. If you believe that, stay here. We'll find another way." The boy's words, echoing his own lessons, deeply moved Marcus. An unexpected twist came from Maya. She had used her podcast to publicize Napier's struggle, and the story went viral, not as sensationalism, but as an example of a community resisting gentrification. Donations started pouring in from all over the country. $5, $50, a few hundred. A wealthy war veteran, inspired by Maya's story, donated $50,000. ESPN, seeing the positive publicity, offered to sponsor the center, but with one condition. Marcus had to accept the analyst position and make appearances promoting Napier. Marcus, facing the proposal, felt torn. It was a solution, but it came with a price. He called a meeting with the boys. Sitting in the gym, Marcus explained the situation, the ESPN offer, the conditions, the dilemma. If I accept, I can save this place. But I'll be here less. You deserve to know. The silence was heavy. Darius spoke first. We don't want you to go. But if it's to save Napier, we get it. Elijah agreed. You taught us to make sacrifices for the team. This is a sacrifice for the team. The words broke Marcus, and he promised. If I go, I'll come back whenever I can. You are my priority. That night, Marcus sat on the empty court, the orange ball in his hands. He thought about everything, the injury, the depression, Napier, the boys, Maya, Michael. The decision wasn't about fame or money, but about who he wanted to be. He picked up the phone and called Derek. I'll accept the ESPN offer, but with conditions. Remote work when possible, and half the salary goes to Napier. Non-negotiable. Derek hesitated but agreed to try. Days later, ESPN accepted the terms. Marcus would be an analyst, but he would maintain autonomy. Napier was saved. The community celebrated. An event was organized, and Marcus, surrounded by Lorraine, Maya, the boys, and even Michael, who flew in from Detroit, felt a mix of relief and melancholy. He had made a choice, but he knew it would bring new challenges. During the event, an 8-year-old child, the daughter of one of the Napier parents, handed him a drawing, Marcus coaching the boys with the words "My hero" written in crayon. Marcus, moved, knelt down, thanking her. Maya photographed the moment, whispering, "This is your legacy." But the complexity of the decision weighed on him. Marcus knew that balancing ESPN and Napier would be difficult, and part of him feared that, by returning to the media world, he would lose the peace he had found. Sitting on the porch that night, he wrote in the notebook, "I chose both worlds. Now I have to prove I can live in them without losing myself." The phrase guided him, and Nashville, with its twinkling lights and silent promises, seemed to support him. The future was uncertain, but Marcus was ready to face it, even if the cost was high. Spring arrived in Nashville in March 2025, trees blooming in shades of pink and white along the banks of the Cumberland, the city awakening from its winter with renewed energy. Marcus Reid, 34, was at the height of a storm he hadn't anticipated. The work at ESPN had begun. He commented on games remotely from a makeshift studio at home, analyzing matches with the sharp insight that had made him a legend. But the balance he had promised was crumbling. The travel increased, practices at Napier became sparse, and Marcus felt torn between two worlds that demanded everything from him. The tension exploded on a March night. Marcus was in Chicago to comment on a Bulls game, his former team, when he received a frantic call from Lorraine. "Elijah has been arrested," she said, her voice breaking. "Fight at school. He's at the precinct." Marcus's heart sank. Elijah, the talented boy on the verge of receiving college scholarships, had ruined everything? He canceled his commitments, caught the first flight back to Nashville, and drove straight to the police station, guilt consuming him. He had promised to be there, but he wasn't. At the precinct, Marcus found Elijah sitting in a cell, his face bruised, his eyes red from crying. The officer explained, Elijah had confronted a classmate who mocked his sick mother. The fight escalated, and he threw the first punch. Marcus posted bail, took Elijah back to Napier, and sat with him in the empty gym. "Why?" Marcus asked, his voice low but firm. Elijah exploded. "Where were you? I needed you, and you were in Chicago on TV being famous again." The words hit Marcus like a shot. Elijah continued, tears streaming. "You said we mattered, but when you got busy, you disappeared. Like everyone else." The confrontation crushed Marcus. He tried to explain, the job, the need to save Napier financially, but it sounded hollow even to him. Elijah, hurt and furious, walked out, leaving Marcus alone on the court, the weight of failure overwhelming. He called Maya, desperate, and she came immediately. Sitting on the court, Marcus broke down. "I ruined everything. I tried to do both, and I failed at both." Maya, always honest, replied, "You can't be in two places at once. You have to choose what truly matters." Marcus knew she was right, but the choice was terrifying. The crisis intensified when ESPN, seeing Marcus's absence from commitments, issued an ultimatum. Fulfill the contract entirely or be fired and return the advance that had saved Napier. Derek called, pressuring him. You signed a contract, Marcus. They can sue you. Marcus, cornered, felt the old anxiety return, cold sweats, racing heart. He was back on the edge of the abyss, but this time, he knew what was at stake. It wasn't fame or money. It was the boys, the community, the life he had built. The turning point came from an unexpected place. Darius, realizing Marcus's struggle, organized the Napier boys for a meeting. They confronted Marcus, not with anger, but with vulnerability. You taught us to fight for what matters, Darius said. Now we want to fight for you. The boys had created a video, compiling clips of Marcus coaching them, their testimonials about his impact, and posted it on social media with the hashtag #MarcusChooseUs. The video went viral, reaching millions, and public pressure turned against ESPN. How could they force a man to abandon community work for ratings? ESPN, facing a public relations nightmare, backed down. They offered to renegotiate. Marcus could be a freelance analyst, working when available, without rigid obligations. But Marcus, reflecting for days, realized even that was too much. He called Derek. I refuse the offer. I want out of the contract. Derek was shocked. You're going to give the money back? Napier will close. Marcus took a deep breath. We'll find another way. I can't live divided like this. The boys need all of me, not crumbs. The decision was terrifying but liberating. Marcus met with Lorraine and Maya, explaining. Lorraine, pragmatic, was worried. How will we keep the center open? Marcus had a proposal: transform Napier into a non-profit organization, seek community sponsorships, organize bigger events. It will be more work, but it will be ours, he said. Maya agreed to help, using her podcast to attract donors. Lorraine, seeing his determination, accepted. Let's try. The moment of reconciliation with Elijah was crucial. Marcus sought him out, finding him on the public court where everything began. You were right, Marcus said, sitting beside him. I tried to have both, and I let you down. But I choose you guys. Always. Elijah, still hurt, studied him. How do I know you won't change your mind? Marcus took the NBA championship ring off his finger, the symbol of his past glory, and handed it to Elijah. Hold on to this. When I earn your trust back, you give it back to me. Elijah, stunned, held the ring, tears in his eyes. I don't need this to know you're real. I just needed you to stay. They hugged, the wound beginning to heal. The final battle came with the real estate developer. Seeing the video go viral and the public support for Napier, he increased pressure on the city council. A public hearing was scheduled and Marcus, Lorraine, the boys, and the community attended. The chamber was packed, hundreds of people, including Maya in uniform, Michael flying in from Detroit, and even Simone, Marcus's ex-girlfriend, who showed up unexpectedly, showing support. Marcus stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding. He spoke, not as a famous athlete, but as a man who had found purpose. I lost everything, Marcus began, his voice steady. My career, my identity, my reason for existing. But here, in this humble place, with these incredible boys, I found something no championship gave me meaning. Napier is not just a court. It's a refuge for kids who have nothing. It's where Darius learned to lead. Where Elijah found hope when his mother was dying. Where I learned that the silence after fame is not the end. It's the beginning of something bigger. If you tear this place down, you're not just destroying bricks. You're destroying futures. The silence was deafening. Then Darius stepped up, followed by Elijah, then other boys, each sharing their story. The community applauded, and the pressure on the city council was immense. The developer, seeing the battle lost, withdrew the offer. Napier was saved not by money, but by people. Marcus, surrounded by the boys, Lorraine, Maya, and Michael, cried openly, the relief and joy overflowing. That night, under the starry Nashville sky, Marcus sat on the Napier court, the championship ring back on his finger. Elijah had returned it, saying, "You deserve it." But Marcus knew the ring no longer defined him. He wrote in the notebook, "The silence after fame is not a death. It's a rebirth. And I chose to be reborn here." The phrase echoed, and Marcus knew that, finally, he had found his place in the world, not in the lights, but in the shadows, where the true impact happens. Summer arrived in Nashville in June 2025, the heat embracing the city like a hug while the sun painted the Cumberland River in shades of gold. Marcus Reid, 35, stood in the renovated Napier Community Center, watching the boys practice under the new hoops, the freshly painted court lines gleaming. The transformation of the place reflected his own journey, from abandonment to life, from ruin to hope. He smiled, his notebook tucked under his arm, and knew he had found his home not in the packed arenas of his past, but in this humble gymnasium where the future was built one shot at a time. The months following the public hearing had been intense, but gratifying. Napier, now officially a non-profit organization, had attracted sponsorships from local businesses, donations from individuals inspired by the story, and even a partnership with Vanderbilt University for educational programs. Marcus, as a volunteer director, worked alongside Lorraine, expanding the center's reach. Not just basketball, but tutoring, counseling, and career workshops. The mission was clear: to give these children not only athletic skills, but tools for life. And it worked. Enrollment doubled, and families from all over Nashville brought their children, trusting in the legacy Marcus was building. Elijah, now 18, had received a full scholarship to play basketball at the University of Tennessee, his dreams becoming reality. At the farewell party organized at Napier, he gave a speech, his voice firm but emotional. Marcus wasn't just my coach. He was my big brother, my father when I needed one. He showed me that giving up is not an option. The gym erupted in applause, and Marcus, sitting beside Lorraine and Maya, wiped away tears, proud. Elijah's mother, now in cancer remission, hugged Marcus, whispering, "You saved my son." The words touched him deeply, a reminder of why he had chosen to stay. Darius, 17, had flourished as a leader. He not only captained the Napier team, but started a mentorship program, where older boys guided the younger ones. Marcus watched him with admiration. The rebellious teenager had transformed into a responsible young man, ready to follow his own dreams. Darius planned to study social work, inspired by Marcus and Lorraine, wanting to help communities like the one that raised him. "You showed me that it's possible to change," Darius had said in a private conversation. "Now I want to do the same for others." Marcus, moved, knew his impact would multiply through these young people. The relationship with Reid had reached a new depth. His father visited Nashville regularly, helping at Napier and even coaching occasionally. They talked more, laughing about old memories and creating new ones. On a night on the porch of the mansion, which Marcus had decided to sell, opting for a smaller, cozier house near Napier, Michael confessed, "I pushed you too hard when you were young. I'm sorry for that." Marcus, surprised by the vulnerability, replied, "You made me strong. I just needed to learn when to use that strength." They hugged, and Marcus knew the generational wound was healed. Michael, once only a harsh critic, was now an ally and friend. Maya had become a constant presence in Marcus's life. They had developed a connection that went beyond friendship, a deep understanding forged in shared experiences of loss and reconstruction. She had expanded her podcast, transforming it into a platform for resilient stories, and Marcus was a frequent guest, not as a former athlete, but as an example of reinvention. On a June evening, during a quiet dinner at a riverside restaurant, Maya asked, "Do you miss the fame?" Marcus reflected, watching the city lights dance on the water. "Sometimes I miss the adrenaline. But I wouldn't trade this," he gestured around, referring to the life he had now, "for anything. I'm happier being invisible and important than famous and empty." Marcus's transformation was visible not only externally but internally. The scars of depression still existed. There were difficult days, moments of doubt, but he had learned to manage them. Therapy, which he had resumed after the climax with Elijah, helped, as did morning meditation on the Shelby Bottoms Greenway. He was no longer afraid of silence. He embraced it as space for reflection. His knee still ached, reminding him of what he had lost, but now he saw the injury not as an end, but as a redirection. He had written in his notebook, "My NBA career gave me championships. My life at Napier gave me purpose. I choose purpose." The future unfolded with promises. Marcus planned to expand the Napier model to other cities, creating a network of community centers focused on low-income youth. Maya would be a partner, using her experience with veterans to include psychological support programs. Lorraine, eager to retire but energized by the success, had agreed to train new directors. Even Derek, his former agent, had called recently asking to help, not for profit but because the mission had inspired him. Marcus was building a legacy that transcended trophies and titles. On a June Sunday, Marcus organized a community game at Napier, former NBA players, including Jamal and some retired Bulls, against a mixed team of boys and parents from the center. The court was packed, families laughing, children running, and Marcus, refereeing the game, felt whole. During a break, a 6-year-old girl, the daughter of one of the parents, handed him a wildflower picked on the way. "You're my hero," she said shyly. Marcus knelt down, accepting the flower, and whispered, "And you are my future." The simple gesture captured everything. He was no longer defined by the past, but by the impact he created in the present. That night, under the starry Nashville sky, Marcus sat on the empty Napier court, the orange ball resting beside him. He opened the notebook, flipping through pages of doubts, pains, and small victories. On the last blank page, he wrote, "The silence after fame is not a loss. It is a gift, the chance to hear who you truly are and build something that matters. I found my voice in the silence. I found my life in the shadows, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." The phrase filled him with peace, and he knew that his journey, though far from perfect, was authentic. Marcus looked up at the gymnasium ceiling, where a new banner hung. "Building futures, one shot at a time." He smiled, stood up with effort, his knee always a reminder, and turned off the lights. Nashville, with its musical streets and vibrant communities, had welcomed him, transformed him, and now embraced him as one of its own. He walked out, the night breeze refreshing, and whispered to himself, "I'm home." Marcus Reid's journey teaches us that the value of a life is not in the applause, but in the silent impact we leave behind. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that new beginnings are possible. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of courage and transformation, and watch the next video to discover how others have found light in the middle of darkness. Together, we can build a world where every voice, even in the silence, echoes with meaning. Start your journey today.